I made up my own sexuality because all the ones that currently exist on paper just don't cut it for me. I decided a while back that almost right was never going to be good enough. And that philosophy has done me pretty well when it comes to a lot of different areas of my life. I decided to expand it, for that reason, into identity words, such as my sexuality, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So this is the flag, and I'm going to explain to you what the colors are supposed to be, because I don't know if you can see what I can see, but the outer ring and the middle circle are supposed to be rose gold, and then in the very middle, that rose gold comes out into a black ring, and then 3 different shades of purple, darker near the black ring and lighter as you go out. So, Philautiasexual, what is that? Well, for starters, it's made up of 2 words that already exist. I did not create the word philautia. It is, in fact, a Greek word that means self-love. But before we get into that, I need to talk about what it's not, okay? It's not to be confused with autosexual. Autosexual is being sexually attracted to yourself, which one might argue I am. But I don't really consider that to be a sexuality. That's, in my opinion, a subcategory of what I'm discussing today. And Philautiasexual means being sexually attracted to people who embody self-love. Self-love above all else. And by the way, all this information we're talking about today was hard-earned. I didn't just sit down one day and decide to create this just for fun. I sat down to create this because it's going to help not just me, but a lot of people who have not really been able to articulate why the sexuality choices that exist right now just aren't quite right. And I cannot be the only person in the world who loves accuracy, so I know it's going to help. Philautiasexual is made up of 2 words. The first one, or two, not words. What is it? Is phil a prefix? Is that what it's called? Well, anyways, phil means love, and here's some examples of words that I'm sure you're familiar with that you've heard before. Philanthropist, philosopher, audiophile, and extremophile. And then we have autia, which is derived from auto, and that comes in words such as automate, autobiography, autonomy, and autodidact. I have decided to create this sexuality because I have figured out the hard way that self-love, if you put that first, everything else just neatly falls into place. And if you put anything else first, everything does not neatly fall into place. So, lover of those who completely and unapologetically love themselves. Now, this flag has 4 themes, and we're going to discuss all of them at length today. If you would like a summary of this, I have one on TikTok, and I'll put that in the description, but this is the whole deal. And it starts with 4 themes: self-love above all, intelligence with empathy, full spectrum of gender expression, and respect for the mirror. And you can see self-love reflected in the color choices that I've used, and we're going to get deeper into that as we go through this presentation. But also, please note that it is shaped like a mirror to represent theme number 4. The purple is meant to represent the full spectrum of gender expression, and the color black is meant to represent intelligence with empathy. Again, I don't know if you can tell the colors, what the colors are supposed to be, but that outer and inner color is meant to be rose gold. So, theme number 1, self-love is at the center of and surrounds sexual attraction. Here's how I came up with the colors. I've always thought that gold was so pretty. I wouldn't necessarily have said it was my favorite color, because in order for a color to be my favorite, it truly has to have an emotional significance, and pretty isn't really enough for that when it comes to me. However, rose gold became my favorite color when I realized how I felt about this concept that I'm explaining today. So gold symbolizes wealth. It always has throughout many cultures across time and space. And wealth can be symbolized also when it... What was I saying? I got a little distracted. Oh, perils of off-the-cuff talk. Gold symbolizes wealth, and wealth can also be empathy. If we're talking about wealth in terms of concrete finances, yes, gold. But I'm talking about a more abstract form of wealth. And I asked myself, what would be the highest form of non-physical, non-financial wealth? And in my opinion, the answer to that question is empathy. When a human has empathy for another human being, it just creates this really beautiful feedback loop and spreads out into the world and makes the world a better place. And the highest form of empathy is self-love. Rose gold symbolizes that because it's just the concept of gold being wealth and the concept of love being rose put together. So, rose gold, self-love. That's how I got that. Theme number 2, intelligence with empathy. Now, there are some people who would argue and say that intelligence and empathy are completely unrelated, and of course, everyone is allowed to have their opinion, but I personally believe there is a certain threshold that you cannot cross when it comes to intelligence, unless you do have empathy for your fellow human being. So for me, I have to perceive a person as having a high intelligence, and empathy is required as included within that perception in order for me to have a sexual attraction to them. Now, the color that I chose was black because in cultures throughout the world and throughout time, black has been a symbol of intelligence. One example is the black caps that people graduate with, or the robes that judges wear. That's always been, not always, I probably shouldn't use the word always, but for a long time that has been a symbol of intelligence, so I am adopting it for this. However, something that is a little bit different that I want to discuss is if this flag is to be depicted, it's meant to use the darkest shade of black available. So right now this is just a digital version, you can't really tell, but if you were, let's say, painting this flag, it should be painted with the darkest shade of black you can possibly procure, which I understand, Vanta black or whatever it's called, may not be available for everyone. I mean, it sure as heck wasn't available for me when I was making the flag. Oh, I have one. Okay, I'm going to show you. This is mine. I made it. See? I took a little bit too much meat out of the sides of it, but, it's still doing its job. So, the darkest shade of black available is meant to symbolize the highest form of intelligence, which includes empathy for other people. Theme number 3 is the full spectrum of gender expression. So, basically, what this means is that masculinity and femininity exist on a spectrum. And in this flag, pink represents total 100% maximum femininity, and blue represents total 100% maximum masculinity, which is why neither color is depicted. I made it purple because I just feel like that is a more mature way of thinking about it. Again, this is just me, my personal sexuality. You do not have to adopt this. But I think the idea of depicting femininity as pink and masculinity as blue is just kind of an archaic way to think about it, because who really gets to decide what 100% of either category is? Really, if we're looking at a person holistically, we just are perceiving that they are either more masculine than feminine in that moment, or more feminine than masculine in that moment. And I wanted to reflect that in the flag. So I used shades of purple, which is pink and blue, mixed together. So, question, does the purple spectrum only represent the continuum between masculine and feminine, or can it also represent the continuum between man and woman, as well as male and female? And the answer to that question is no. Again, my flag, mine, it only represents the spectrum of masculinity to femininity and vice versa. Which brings us to why. Why not? Great question. And there are 3 reasons for this, okay? So reason number 1, I personally do not acknowledge gender as a feeling for me, for Embra. Okay, I acknowledge gender expression as a feeling. So for example, I can say that I feel more feminine or I feel more masculine, but I cannot say that I feel more or less like a woman in any given moment, because I don't even know what that means. The word man and woman, these words are not emotionally charged for me at all. So if you ask me, do you feel like a woman, I genuinely cannot answer that question because I do not know what it means. Okay? That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, I know if I'm attracted to persons, I guess technically that's grammatically correct, huh? I don't like it though. I know if I'm attracted to people or not way before I know what their gender identity is or even what their genitalia looks like. Like, I don't need to know that information to acknowledge the fact that I'm sexually attracted to another person. So my logic is, why would that even need to be depicted in the flag? And that's the big problem that I had with most of the sexuality names and flags that already exist, is that the focus was put on the human body. And don't get me wrong, like, I love me a human body, okay? I'm obsessed with the human body of people that I'm already attracted to. That's not the information I use to figure out if I am attracted to a person. And I wanted to reflect that in the flag for accuracy purposes. Finally, number 3, sexual attraction is about perception, not reality. And this is a big statement. So we are definitely going to be getting into that later on. But I want to put this information here because I want to make it very clear. Just because I don't acknowledge gender as a feeling doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with anyone else for feeling like a man or feeling like a woman or not feeling like a man or not feeling like a woman. I trust that people who identify in that way know what that means. Just because I don't know what something means and can't acknowledge it doesn't mean that it's wrong for other people. So I wanted to make that very clear. Again, my sexuality. No one else has to adopt this. This is just a good way for me to make sense of how I feel and perceive the world. Okay? So, back to the themes. Number 4, which is a great lead-in, actually, to number 4, which is respect for the mirror. Here's a concept that I think if people would adopt it, it would save a lot of heartache. It would save a lot of disappointment. You know, the disappointment that comes when you treat people as projects and you try to turn them into versions of themselves that you could be happy with. I have been guilty of that over and over and over and over and over. And I had a light bulb moment, like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't I just be attracted to people who are already what I want instead of finding people who are not quite what I want and trying to turn them into what I want? And the answer to that question, I mean, I'm not trying to be like a life coach right now, but let me just throw this quick aside in. The answer to that question is because I didn't really believe I could find what I wanted. Oh, okay, let's not get into that right now. Back to the flag. So, respect for the mirror. Potential sexual partners and I must see each other the way that each of us sees ourselves. So what does that mean? We are going to come up with some examples, honey. Just don't you worry. Because I understand this is a complicated concept and most people have not even considered this before. So examples shall abound. But I must perceive potential partners the way they perceive themselves, and they must perceive me the way I perceive myself in order for sexual compatibility to be the case. Or at least, me to perceive that there is sexual attraction strong enough and relevant enough for me to act on. Let's put it that way. So, let's talk about some examples. I don't know if you guys have seen this show, but it's called The Good Place. Excellent show. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to let you know that if you have seen this show, you'll get exactly what I'm talking about. There's this character named Chidi, who is the character that is circled in this image. And he did not think he was a good person. Like, he was super obsessed with being a good person, but to the point where it was actually bad for his mental health. And this is a great example because if I, for example, am attracted to someone and I tell them, hey, I think you're a great person, if that person were then to disagree with me, we're not compatible. I don't need to know any other information. I'm not going to try to drag that other human being into my belief system about them. I'm just going to only date people, only be in a relationship with people, only be romantically involved, sexually involved with people who already see themselves the way I see them, okay? There's going to be many examples, I promise. But if I tell you that I think you're a 10 out of 10 and you disagree with me, well, we're incompatible. If I tell you that I think you're a genius and you disagree, we are not compatible. And that actually happened, by the way. Like, these examples are I didn't just pull them out of my ass, okay? I'm giving examples from my real life. Like, there was this one time I told this guy that I thought he was a genius, and I swear I wasn't trying to like stroke his ego or anything. I genuinely felt this way, and I don't like unspoken things because they give me the ick. So when I feel something, when I think something, I like to go ahead and get it out of my system immediately, even though sometimes that's like messy and causes problems. In the long run, it turns out to be better because things end before they were going to end in anyway. But long story short, this guy asked his mom, "Mom, do you think I'm a genius?" She said no. He comes back to me. "My mom said I'm not a genius." Okay. I could have saved a lot of strife for myself if I had just respected the mirror and dipped out at that point. Like, I should not have been intimately involved with that guy after that. But, you know, we live and we learn. I know what I know at this moment. So, if you tell me that you think I'm too something, too much, too weird, too loud, too quiet, too annoying, too extra, too gaudy, too cringe, too busy, too lazy, too smart, too dumb, blah, 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 we're not compatible. Very simple. If you tell me that you think I'm not enough of something, see above, again, we're not compatible. If I tell you that I feel a certain way and you tell me that I do not feel the way I just told you I felt, we are incompatible. Case closed. Actually, case is not closed. I have more examples. Note on respecting the mirror. This also includes topics of identity, okay? Such as gender, gender identity, biological sex, spirituality, morality. There are so many examples of this, and a few of them I've given you already. But gender expression is not on this list, and that's going to be relevant later. Put that in your pocket. We'll get it out in a minute, okay? But, oh look, this slide came earlier than I thought. Oh, take it out of your pocket. Its absence from this list is why it's referenced on my flag. Because sexuality is about how we are perceiving someone, okay? I didn't put this slide in this presentation, but if you see someone whose face looks like this, and they tell you that they're happy, your first inclination should not then to feel like they're wrong. You shouldn't. It doesn't make logical sense for you to immediately think that they're lying to you. Because there are some people who are the happiest, smiliest people you've ever seen in your life who are this close to killing themselves. Okay? Not everyone expresses their emotions in a way that is socially acceptable or part of the social norm. So let's take that idea to this concept. Okay? Whatever their gender identity is may not necessarily be immediately obvious by the way they are expressing in that moment. All you have access to, all we have access to, is how a person chooses to express, you know? Not anything about their biological sex or biogender or identity. None of that information is available just from the naked eye. It's the expression, for example. No, for example is not what I meant to say. Let's start over that sentence. Let's start that sentence over. The expression, in other words, is not something that we can agree or disagree about it, okay? No. Expression, in other words, is not something we can agree or disagree about. There we go. I'm not going to edit this, by the way. I hate editing, so just deal with it. So, this is why it's part of my sexuality, because I enjoy seeing everyone's different ways of expressing themselves, even though I might not get a lot of information or definite information based on the expression. It's still all we can actually see. So that's why it's on the flag. So, what I just said may have been a little bit, ooh, let's go in the middle, haha. Okay, what I just said may have been a little bit murky, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit. It would make sense for me to say, this person, whom I perceive as a biological female, has a short haircut. That's a green flag, and now I'm curious. Why would it be a green flag? Well, for me, it shows nonconformity And nonconformity is always a green flag because it is a good sign that people have thought a little bit more about who they are and how they want to portray themselves to the world than people who are completely conforming to society's norms. But that is not what this video is about, so we're not going to get neck deep into that topic. Let's move on. This person I perceive as a biological male is wearing a dress. That's a green flag. Now I'm curious. This person is presenting with an androgynous expression. That's a green flag. I'm now curious. Basically, the common denominator between all three of those examples is people who flout the social norm are interesting to me. And now I want to know more information about them. However, it would not make sense to say, this person appears to be a woman, but women don't have short hair, so now I'm confused. Or, this person appears to be a man, but men don't wear dresses, so now I'm confused. Or, I cannot tell if this person is a man or a woman, therefore, I am confused about whether or not I should be attracted to them. I understand that there are people who feel this way, I just don't think it makes any sense. Henceforth, me making up my own sexuality and my own flag. So, little Q&A. Why is this flag circular and not rectangular? That's a great question. Circles are about flowing, connection, togetherness. If you think about the architecture of a building, circular rooms actually promote communication. There are certain teaching philosophies, for example, that suggest students should be arranged in a circle rather than in rows, and teachers will tell you that that does facilitate communication, sometimes a little bit too much, I say, as someone with a teaching background. But anyway, straight lines and right angles symbolize hard stops and starts, rigid structures and separation, and that's really not what I want to convey with my flag. So that leads us to the next question, which is, if you wanted to fly this as a flag and put it on a flagpole, how would you even do that, considering the fact that it's circular? And I would say, just my 2 cents, to sandwich it between transparent surfaces and then attach the edge of that transparent surface to a flagpole, like a heavy piece of plastic or something like that. Or actually, I just got embroidering stuff, and I'm intending to embroider it onto something transparent. I don't know, maybe I'll like cut a shower curtain. Nah, that might be a little bit too, well, they have thin shower, you know what, that's not important right now. Anyway, next Q&A. What? Oh, there's a typo. Well, you know what, there's a typo. What do the individual shades of purple correspond to? So the darkest shade symbolizes more masculine than feminine in actions and or appearance, and the lightest purple symbolizes more feminine than masculine. And the medium color in the middle symbolizes androgyny. Again, this is about gender expression. So it's about my perception of someone as more masculine than feminine, or more feminine than masculine, or androgynous. And I could potentially be attracted to anyone, anywhere on that spectrum, because, again, everything begins and ends with self-love. So, another thing that I say so a lot, it is what it is. The ring that symbolizes more masculine than feminine is right next to the ring that symbolizes intelligence and empathy, and I wanted to make very clear that this is not me, like, low-key trying to say that people who present in a more masculine way are smarter than people who present in a more feminine way. That's not what this is. It was just a design choice based on the fact that I think going from dark to light looked better than going dark, light, dark. So keep that in mind. I would have the same disclaimer if I had flipped it and started with the more feminine than masculine ring next to the intelligence ring. I would be making the same disclaimer. So I just wanted you guys to know that I'm not trying to say that one group is smarter than the other, because I don't think that at all. Why are the black ring and the center circle unbroken by negative space? Well, empathy for self, which is the center circle of self-love, and empathy for others, which is the black ring of intelligence, are like a bridge, and that bridge connects the two halves of this mirror. And therefore, it is the bridge that connects a minimum of 2 people required for external sexual attraction. So, excuse me. The bridge that connects both of those people is self-love and intelligence with empathy. All done? All done already? Oh, okay. Cool. I thought it was a little bit longer. Womp womp. Did I forget a slide? Hold on. I thought I had a few more examples of what respecting the mirror means. But you know what? I may have put those examples on a different presentation for something else. But whatever. I think you pretty much got the main points of everything regarding this flag. Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Philautiasexual, lover of those who completely and unapologetically love themselves. I have realized after a lot of poor decisions that the reason why self-love needs to come first for me personally is because people end up self-sabotaging a good thing when they don't love themselves first. And I'm not saying this from on top of a high horse, okay? I have definitely sabotaged some good things in my life as well. But that's how we learn lessons, right? We learn lessons and then sometimes we make up our own sexuality. Okay, bye.